Okay, so our series, as you know, because you're here, is held on the fourth Monday of every month. On May 24th, Cuban American poet Suzanne Frischkorn hosts Rena P. Espaillat, Lee Herrick, and Sean Ballard in a reading sponsored by the Institute for Ethnic Studies at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Links to register for the reading may be found on terrain.org, as well as our Facebook page, and I'll post it here in the chat in just a moment. And if you are interested in sponsoring a reading, well, you're always welcome to contact me at info@terrain.org. I'll be posting book links in the chat in support of our readers this evening from their local bookstores. But if you missed those, or if you want to find other books by tonight's readers or other terrain.org contributors, hop on over to our bookshop page at bookshop.org/shop/terrain.org, or find the link under the about the terrain.org, under about in the terrain.org website navigation menu. Okay, so now a word about terrain.org. We are the world's first online journal of place, publishing since 1998. We are an all-volunteer organization that doesn't charge to access our content, nor charge to submit, nor contain advertising. Indeed, we are run by the power of goodwill and dedicated weekends and evenings. And we are run by donations from good folks like you, who are welcome to donate online at terrain.org/donate. Thank you for your support and for being a part of the terrain.org community. Finally, and I'm going to check, make sure nobody's in the waiting room, okay? Finally, I'm delighted tonight to announce a new initiative by terrain.org. It is our annual terrain.org Editors Prize. The prize, selected by terrain.org's primary editing team of nonfiction editor Elizabeth Dodd, fiction editor Pam Houston, and poetry editor Derek Sheffield, and editor-in-chief Simmons Bunton, that's me, will be awarded each spring to writers of color, LGBTQ+, women, and or other marginalized communities whose contribution explores place particularly in the context of social, environmental, and climate justice. A single contribution in each genre appearing the previous year in terrain.org will be awarded. This is our first year, indeed the first anyone external has heard of this new prize, which is for $500 per writer. So tonight and now, I'm delighted to announce the 2020 terrain.org Editors Prizes are awarded to, in poetry, Sean Ballard for his stunning Letter to America climate change poem titled Day 40. And I'll post the link for that in the chat here in just a bit. In nonfiction, it's Tammy Parker Song for her incredible essay on identity, heritage, and abuse in coastal Alaska, The Fifth Direction. And in fiction, it's Brittany Corrigan for her terrific mythical pandemic story, The Ghost Town Collectives. Congratulations, Sean and Tammy and Brittany. We'll make the official announcement on the terrain.org website after this reading. And Sean, Tammy, and Brittany, I'll follow up with you on the $500 prize in just a bit. So congratulations. I saw some applause. Let's do a little more applause here for folks. And thanks for letting me invite you, Sean and Tammy and Brittany, with the most sort of nebulous of announcements so that I didn't give it away before announcing it now, just live. So let's turn to our reading, followed by Q&A. And again, please post your questions in the chat area. And then I think Alison Hawthorne Deming will probably call on you when she pulls out those questions after the reading. And thanks again for joining us. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's host, Alison Hawthorne Deming. Alison is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, among other awards, is a Regents Professor at the University of Arizona, which is the highest professorship award you can receive at the university. Her new nonfiction book, A Woven World, on fashion, fishermen, and the sardine dress, will be out from Counterpoint Press in August. Alison, thank you for joining us. Take it away.
My pleasure. Well, while we're on the thanks, I must add the thanks to Simmons Bunton, because Terrain is a labor of love and great devotion from him, and his vision is everywhere in all that we get to enjoy and be enriched by. So thank you for all and for bringing us together for what promises to be quite a marvelous evening. I could not be happier or more grateful tonight to join you all in celebrating Earth Month and Poetry Month with these three essential writers. Their work attends with fierce care to our earthly existence, bringing together science and spirit to feed us, to help us face and quiet our grief in this time of so many losses and hungers. Nothing's more inspiring to me than the big story of life on Earth, to be a life among other lives, human, plant, animal, fungi, microbe, to be present to what Sheffield calls the aggregate beauty. And nothing is more soul-crushing to me than the diminishment of life on Earth at the hands of human cruelty and greed. But poets bring us new ways of seeing. Poets educate our emotions. Poets invite us to ask, can our love for natural beauty fuel our commitment towards social justice? And these poets lift us into lyrical flight. So friends, we are in for a spectacular ride tonight. I'll introduce each reader before their reading, and we're going to start with Derek Sheffield. His collection, Not for Luck, was selected by Mark Doty for the Wheelbarrow Books Poetry Prize. His other books include Through the Second Skin and Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy, which he co-edited with Simmons Bunton and Elizabeth Dodd. He's in the final stages of work on Cascadia, a literary field guide, which he is co-editing with Liz Bradfield and Seymour Furman, and which will be published by Tupelo Press in the spring of 2022, further enriching the long and informed relationship he's had with the bioregion in which he lives. He lives on the eastern slope of the Cascade Range in Washington and is the poetry editor of terrain.org. Please welcome Derek Sheffield.
Oh, thank you so much, Alison. What a delight to be here with you and Jane and Drew and Simmons and Elizabeth and everybody. 158, I saw the number just flicked up of all of you. Laura Pritchett, I saw you. You've got your whole class here from the Western Colorado MFA program. That's really exciting. Thank you for introducing your students to terrain.org. I can't wait to meet you in person when we present together in mid-June at Storycatcher in Chadron, Nebraska, and that I like in person outside. Yes, oh yes. So thank you for being here, all of you. I know there are many more things to be doing on this fine spring day than be sitting in front of your screen, but I'm glad that you've chosen to spend a little bit of time with us here tonight. This is I want to start off with a kind of an ironic opening poem. It's the first poem in Not for Luck. It's of a poem. Timid as any herd animal. That bright of the blue sky variety, raising every racket of mower and blower, backhoe and whacker, not to mention every street's hatch of after-school slammers and high-pitched trampoliners. Oh, just a while longer, a day, maybe 3, give them a rest. Have the hammocks hold fast and the bark remain in the dog. Have the thinnest veil of dusk, fog or drizzle, call stillness near, her sister silence here. This poem was born about 14 Aprils ago, and it's called April. Now he closes his book. Slanting light warms a blue bowl of napkins, a table specked with crumbs. He closes his eyes. Birds, passing car, all the leaves lengthening in their own good time. Somewhere, a bear opening her eyes. It is enough today to walk slowly upstairs where his daughter curls in her fuzzy blanket. It is just right to bend close and sniff the lotion of her sleep, to read in the lines creasing her neck how their story might go. Pandemic's been rough on friends groups. I've seen it in my daughters and their classmates, seen it in my students, seen it in my own friends groups, near and far. Oh gosh, just not since the pandemic, but probably the last 4.5 years, that line of Yeats has been spearing its way through me. The center cannot hold, you know, that one, a couple of lines there, center cannot hold. Here's first grade. Sunday afternoon, and she looks up from her drawing, wants to know if I know the game where you put your head down and thumb up until someone picks you. Yes, I say, across the room and half listening. Well, I always picked my friends, but they never picked me. I pause in the middle of a sentence. Who are your friends? Everyone, she says, as if I had asked 1 + 1 were the color of the sky. Sunlight draws a skewed rectangle across the floor. I see, I say, and let my notebook close, seeing children in rows, heads on desks, her big ears poking through sandy hair, listening for a step or a breath. Yes, I remember that game. And I stand and walk over to find the outline of her hand plunging through a white sky. Jane and I have been fortunate enough to have done field residencies courtesy of the Spring Creek Project at the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest, as has Alison. And I don't know if Drew has done a field residency or not. I know that he has read for them. Drew, if you haven't done that field residency yet, when you come out and do it, maybe that is when we can work you in as the keynote for our bird fest here. We could get you out to this part of the country, and the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest is a very special place on the planet. It was Barry Lopez lived like a mile from there, from the border. It was, and I was going there, and I was all excited to be among these in this late stage successional forest. No, that's not quite it. I was excited to be in this old growth forest. No. Alison gave me the right word. She was like, "Oh gosh, you get to go be among the elders, the elder beings. And I was like, yes, that's what I wanted to say. Late stage successional forest wasn't quite doing the work. I was among the elder beings, and they are, for 200 years, they are studying everything about these elder beings and this place. And it's just amazing. And what is, of course, especially fine is that along with the scientific data um, of, of everything, the hydrology, the ornithology, the ichthyology, the mitochondriology. I mean, what do you call the dirt people? Wait, what's that? Well, tell me later. The dirt people, everything. They're studying everything. How the trees break down. They're pairing that data with long-term ecological reflection, poems, songs, music, photographs, paintings, everything, art goes in the data banks along with the science. How beautiful, how beautiful. Check out the Spring Creek Project in the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest. So here is one from my time there. And it does make me think of, thank you, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth have you been in the H.J. Andrews, Elizabeth? Have you done that one? You have too. Okay. Elizabeth Dodd. Okay, great. We got a lot of us here probably tonight. We can have an H.J. reunion. But, you know, Mary Oliver said, when she was talking about what poetry could possibly do for the living world, she said that you draw more flies with honey than vinegar. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. And I think that's probably right. I sure as hell hope it is right, but I think we need vinegar too. I think we need ginger beer, Moscow mules, wine, IPAs. I think we need every liquid we've got. So here's a little poem called We Could See. If we mapped this mountain creek's channel over many seasons of spill and flood, gravel and jam, we could play those maps back like the flip pictures we drew in rooms of another age to let one more hour slip by. And we could see, without a doubt, that jabbed snake writhe before our eyes, and would hear, of course, not a sound in such a scream. While in our cities, bright glasses of iced water, like nothing, kept appearing across tabletops. So if you were here at the beginning while Simmons was making me juggle, you heard the story about the last time that Simmons and Drew and Jane and I were in the same kind of physical place together. And here is a poem that came from that experience, that choice to go birding with Drew Lanham and Kurt Caswell and John Lane, courtesy of Simmons's little car, his little GTI that he loaned us that day. And I think it's about done. If it's not quite done and if it's a bad poem, it's Drew's fault, okay? But I wanted to read it tonight. This is called Anthropocene, and it is dedicated to Kurt, Drew, and John. Dust everywhere and cracks where there was water. Scent of piling tar in the heat. What we have been looking for looks at us from the ground. We tilt our binoculars and focus on an owl's impossibly wide yellow eyes staring into ours. A few steps closer, and still not a blink or wing shiver, only the twin eclipsing suns of his gaze and the worn duster of another's carcass beside him. The powdery, scoured acres make us think of poison. We decide not to step any closer. Try to see everything. His ear tufts and hooked bill, his feathers of silence, and not look away as we live on. So this book could very well have a title called Not for Luck, colon, on daughters and other wild things. And here's, this is one of those quick poems where the title flows right into the poem. She gathers rocks wherever she goes. Make that sticks, no, leaves, which is to say, heads of flowers and hips. More river than daughter, her arms fill with treasures of every trail. Hold this, she says, to make us her pockets, her buckets, her pockets already clack and bristle full. It goes fast, they say, and it was going as they said it, or it's gone into us, counting to five times a day, saying, time for bed, time to wake, time to leave. And it's gone into her quickening eyes and stride that have left us among all the things she once believed she couldn't leave behind. Alison, I see that mother nod of yours. Oh boy. You know what? I think that's probably a good place to stop right there. I got too chatty, and I just want. Oh, here I can do a little more chatty before I got a minute left. I set a timer here. I was out walking today, and I made sure to get outside today because I knew I was going to be with Alison and Jane and Drew, and of course that's the test. I mean, you gotta pass the test. So Drew, I'm going to give you a little test right here. Well, I'm actually just going to ask for your help. I found these feathers in the pine forest.
Okay. Back it away from the camera a little bit, Derek.
In the pine forest. What's that?
Back it up a little more.
There we go. Okay. And I think I have an idea of this being. It's in the ponderosa pine forest. And it did burn there in 94. It's a fire adapted ponderosa pine, Eastern Washington. So I'm just going to throw it out there for Drew. He can, say something when his time comes. But listen, I was out there wandering around, and Drew he got his first rose-breasted grosbeak, was it, of the season, and I got my first Townsend's warbler. And he was just singing away. Heather, I think you're with us tonight. And I think maybe I really learned his song when you and I were birding at the Rogue Bird Fest. So thank you for that. I didn't have my binoculars with me, but the song was very clear. First Townsend's warbler of the season, so glorious. And I was thinking, because I just read John Lane's fantastic interview of Drew in terrain.org, which you got to check out. It's like it shows you what an interview can be in the 21st century. It's really kind of amazing. but Thoreau is invoked. And I was thinking about Thoreau's essay Walking today. And there's this other book that I love called Forest Bathing that Hannah Fries put together, where she talks about Shinrin-yoku. And I was thinking that when Thoreau wrote that essay Walking, and he talks about sauntering and what he means by sauntering, I think he's talking about forest bathing. I think it's the same thing. So I'm going to stop speaking now and pass it on to Alison. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Derek, for those gorgeous poems. More river than daughter. I love that so much. And you're attending to those young women as they grow up so wonderfully. Okay, well, now what a pleasure. I have been following the work of Drew Lanham since before the befores, a while. And it is with great joy I have watched his writing unfold and find audiences and feed people in such profound ways. Drew Lanham, PhD, is a native of Edgefield, South Carolina, and a product of family farm, abundant wildness, and bittersweet legacy of land interdependence by chain and choice. He is an alumni distinguished professor, provost professor, and master teacher of wildlife ecology at Clemson University. Drew is a cultural and conservation ornithologist whose work addresses the confluence of race, place, and nature. He's the poet laureate of his home county and the author of Sparrow Envy, a field guide to birds and lesser beasts, and The Home Place, memoirs of a colored man's love affair with nature. The memoir is a winner of the Reed Environmental Writing Award from the Southern Environmental Law Center. Also a winner of the Southern Book Prize and a 2017 finalist for the Burroughs Medal. His forthcoming book, From Farrar, Straus and Giroux, Range Maps, Birds, Blackness, and Loving Nature Between the Two, is the work that he hopes will breathe being into his desire to make birds whos as well as whats, and his writing to become the definitive feel guide for blending culture and conservation. Drew resides in Seneca, South Carolina, a soaring broad-wing hawk's downhill glide from the foot of the Southern Appalachian Escarpment, the Cherokee once called the Blue Wall. And he also hangs out at a sweet little place called Sunset Camp that you can read about if you read that lovely conversation terrain between Drew and John Lane. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Drew Lanham.
Thank you so much, Alison. Wow, it's an honor to be here among kindred spirits and friends. Derek has been such an amazing colleague and friend, and Simmons and Jane and folks out there. I know I would miss names if I started calling, but y'all are my peeps. And I really appreciate it. And I have to give a shout out to Alison for even being here, because hers was the first poetry workshop I ever took back at Wild Branch, back in the hinterlands of, I guess, near Anthropocene. I don't know, somewhere like that. But what I'd like to do tonight during my time is to share a little bit of the new here, a field guide to birds and lesser beasts. And I have to give a shout out to my publishing peeps at Hub City, Read Write South, Hub City Writers Project, and Meg Reed and the whole staff there, my friend John Lane, who I practice poetry with on the regular. So I want to share mostly from there, but I also sort of wanted to, from the beginning, sort of give a flavor for maybe how I write, what I'm writing to. And so I'm sharing, Derek, this is a new piece that's not in Sparrow Envy. I'll share some of Sparrow Envy in a minute. But this this just hopped off today, so it could be very bad, but I think it maybe will set the tone. It's called hunting season. Been open season now going on 402 years is what the warden claimed. Huntable populations were stocked by tall ships, black game gathered from Senegal, Ghana, Cameroon to grow indigo and rice, cotton and sugarcane, he said. I had heard a different version, a more acceptable version learned from the history books, but didn't know the plan lying underneath it all. They was tagged with shackles and chains, he said. Survivors past the sharks and seasickness made superior for quarry when they was used up or tried to claim rights, much less escape. That's when the harrying by horse riding slave catchers and sweat sniffing hounds came into play. Sometimes a rope was used to hoist the trophy up high, or we'd take pieces off of them. You know what I mean, boy? He winked and grinned that grin they do, then looked at me from the waist down, never in my own eye. I asked how it lasted past all the independence talk of shutting such things down, of the rights of free men and not treading on anyone. And he told me Jim Crow and Supreme Courts, presidents and congressmen, a founding father or two, all in cahoots was how he put it, made the sport perfectly legal. To make sure the population was kept in check, those tasked to serve and protect were given license to take what they wanted. It would be a way to domesticate those that couldn't be tamed with segregation or microaggressions. There ain't no limits to the harvest, the old timer chimed in. No methods whatsoever disallowed. Because unlike beasts, sporting ain't the objective here. Guns, knees, chokeholds, prison sentences. Killing is what counts. Dehumanizing the close second. Wondering when the season ends, I mused aloud. Here in South Carolina, the time to get after white-tailed deer starts late summer, goes all the way to New Year's. He snorted. Oh, that's nothing. The season on y'all is 24/7, 365, or until infinity runs out. No rest for the weary, I guess, was all I could say. None at all, he replied, unless you're the final one to get. It's killing time. Now enough talking. I'm gonna need your license and registration. You got a taillight out. I'm gonna need you to step out of the vehicle. Seems to me you're resisting how this story is supposed to end. So it's a little bit of the flavor. It, a lot of what I have written sort of blends this bird-brainedness that Derek talks about. By the way, Derek, while we're speaking blackness, was that black-backed woodpecker? Okay, I knew woodpecker, right?
You got it, man.
I knew woodpecker. So for that woodpecker, I'm going to find a way to write about its blackness. I'm going to find a way to write about it being a bird of places that other people might pass over. So that's what I try to bring to mind here with Sparrow Envy. So this first piece that I'm going to share is a mark of the book, and I have these intermittent pieces called field marks. So from a birder's perspective, field marks are those things that help us know the bird. So this is field mark number 3. Wood thrush ID, made simple. It's not so much about identifying what birds are as feeling who birds are. Head nods, jaw drops, smiles, tears, and abject adoration are all field marks for identifying the wood thrush, a brown-backed, forest-singing soul seldom seen. but more often heard and felt deeply. As this bird pumped its heart out in auto 3-part harmony, the one inside my own chest stopped beating for a while. So it's hard for me to get away from birds. You know, it's profession, it's passion, it's all sorts of inspiration. But again, sort of blending. I like to blend the science with current events, and you know, John Lane and I talk about writing on axes. I write to nature, place, and identity. And this piece is called Octoroon Warbler. So this sort of a longish poem that takes the route of talking about some of the current naming debate with birds. And by the way, you if you came up in Louisiana, some parts of probably East Texas, Mississippi Delta, octoroon refers to that state of miscegenation where one drop of black blood makes you black. So if a grandparent was black, you're going to be an octoroon. Octoroon Warbler. As a taxonomic committee of one, I alone have decided that the past transgressions of long ago dead and rotted bird watchers must be amended. That it is my sole responsibility and pleasure to right the wrongs of racist slaveholding artists, ornithologists, of genocidal complicit naturalists, of grave-robbing, skull-fondling phrenologists, of the lot of white supremacist men with the self-serving penchant for naming things after themselves. I hereby declare my solo vote singularly unanimous. Everything I decide here and now passes. So shall it be written, let it be done. Word is bond. My opinion's good as any other treaty signed in the shifting sand of time. I do hereby exchange, alter, or replace the names of the birds that follow. Their former identities by patriarchal rule to be expunged, that they should have new identities by my demand. Backman sparrow, denizen of longleaf pine savanna, of wiregrass, of fire-kissed sandy ground, shall be once again pine woods, a true great again recovery worthy of celebration. And whilst I'm releasing species from bondage, consider the likely forever gone warbler of the same Charleston preacher's human chattel possessing label. Can we not do better? Yes, swamp cane warbler, appropriately by design of damp, dank, dark place, it so chose when still in existence, escaping notice. I would have suggested Tubman's warbler, but then why make it any easier to erase blackness when extinction has already done the job? LeConte's sparrow will henceforward be orange-faced, the brown-backed secretive skulker of wet, weedy rank with tangled, overgrown fields, hider in thickety traces, deserves better fate than linkage to a Confederate armorer working to put in place a permanent apartheid nation. Townsend solitaire, thrush-esque thing of Western slope migration, shall now be up and down solitaire, mobile altitudinal propensity taken into full account. The lemon yellow-headed black and white Western jewel of a warbler tagged by that same Indian grave robbing man shall now be Doug fir specifically, known for its tie to evergreen boughs, no disarticulated native heads required. To correct an oversight of manifest destiny and opening the Western door to indigenous genocide not accepted, behold Clark's Nutcracker, the capacious, resourceful, intelligent corvid given title by the fire-haired captain of the Corps, henceforth shall be York's crow, designated the first bird so named for a man of color. About damn time the brother got credit for saving the core of Discovery's always imperiled bacon. Even as property, his contributions went largely without merit. To even the score a bit more, redact the other leader, Lewis from Northern Rockies woodpecker. He of Trail of Tears, Cherokee removal infamy, christened the gorgeous picked Sacagawea's woodpecker instead. As for John James Audubon, JJ, if I might, he of the posed painted birds of ego larger than life to go along with his baby elephant folio, what does a slave-owning man passing for white might deserve? What might the demigod of bird demerit after all these years? Let his name now be struck for malfeasance to humanity, for being prickish and a generally abhorrent man. Audubon's Orioles shall be Rio Grande. The seagoing petrel with the artist moniker shall now be Warm Sea Wanderer, an identity worthy of its tropic trotting status. And last but not least, for review, the yellow-rumped warbler of Occidental race, occurring beyond the Mississippi to points beyond that, since Johnny couldn't bear the very thought of interracial miscegenation. Let's call the butter-butted bird what it is. In hindsight of his own mixed race denial, behold the octoroon warbler. Thus I proclaim on this very day, whenever this ruling shall be read on whatever future date, that we remember the identity of the birds for what they are, and never forget the sins of past imperfections too. To not repeat the hubris of taking good for granted, but letting creatures have their own names. No interference from haters required. So that's the that's sort of the flavor of that. Alison, how many minutes do I have? Any time left? Okay.
You have what you need.
Okay. So that's sort of my flavor for this work. But I, you know, it's I would like to say it's a balance, but it's not really a balance. It depends on the day, and sort of the minute when something flies off. So, you know, this book isn't even balanced species wise. This is a piece called Thrush Lust, because I am in love with, I love warblers, but I love thrushes. I love thrushes because, I mean, they range right from bluebirds all the way to varied thrushes that you guys have out there, the robin that everybody knows, but then there are these forest thrushes, what used to be called brown-backed or olive-backed thrushes, that that hold a special place for me because they largely go unnoticed until they speak, until they sing. This is called Thrush Lust. A thrush would rather you have it in pieces. I for purple berry. Tawny throat, dawn's first hidden shadow. Moss olive brown back, blending fawn spotted breast into dappled evening light, tumbled through September's fatigue green failing. It is a jigsaw puzzled thing until a ripening want calls, hangs, tempts. Hidden form revealed cannot resist what begs taking, is whole until history thinks better of what it knows itself to be. A secret whisper on night wind fades quiet into imagining, fragments scattered to past tense, a hushed wish unbelieved. So again, it's lots of birds, right? But then you're sort of always pulled back into this place with the news of the day. And this is a piece that appeals to the lister that many of us are or aren't. Many of us have life lists of birds. I call this lifeless list. Do you know how hard it is to admire plumage on a bird? To separate one warbler's chip note from another, or count the telltale hind wing spots on a butterfly? Or to remember the name of a wildflower seen 100 times? Or gather the energy to find the Latin binomial of a beetle in a field guide? Or even give a fuck what the name of anything is beyond the last black body that lay still after being murdered by the police? I can no longer keep track of the last hurricane that blew in from the earth's rising heat, of the last tweet inciting riot, the last fire that burned and burned and burned and burned, of the hundreds of thousands of infected, now dead. It is a sad, exhausting, lifeless list I'd rather not keep, growing longer by the hour. There's little room left in my heart these days for listing anything. Hardest task comes in not becoming a member of that litany of dread. So it's heavy, but it's not all heavy, I promise. So this is a piece. I'll read just a couple more and be done, because we need to hear these lovely poets coming up. This is a piece I call Love Handle. And again, it's another field mark. Handle any life in your hands as if it were your own. Feel the heart beating, small as it may be, and imagine it in your own chest, beating in syncopated time to become shared meter. That pulse, the breathing, is your rhythms, your ins and outs, its ins and outs. Look close under whatever warty skin or soft fur or gaudy feathers and see self. Its being, your being. Be in that same skin for what moments it will allow. Then, when the convergence between you is sealed, release that wild soul to free roaming as you would desire of your own. So I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you so much for having me in. And Derek, we're going to share Anthropocene poems because, you know, we have one together. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Drew, thank you so much for that stunning reading. What a pleasure, and much, much appreciated. Well, Jane, you just take your full time, even though we're running late, because we'd rather make Q&A a little shorter and have you have your fullness before us, because Jane Hirshfield, as you all know, is certainly a national treasure and a poet who has given a great, great deal to our spirits for decades. Jane Hirshfield's 9th collection, Ledger, a book centered on the environmental crisis and issues of social justice, appeared from Knopf in March 2020. Named by the Washington Post as among the modern masters, in 2017, she founded Poets for Science in conjunction with the first March for Science, where she read her poem on the 5th day to 50,000 people at the pre-March rally on the Washington Mall. Jane is also the author of 2 now classic books of essays, 9 Gates and 10 Windows, and the editor, co-translator of 4 books representing world poets from the deep past. She's been the Blue River Poet in Residence for the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest and for a neuroscience department at UCSF. Her honors include fellowships from the Guggenheim and Rockefeller Foundations, National Endowment for the Arts, Academy of American Poets, the Poetry Center and California Book Awards, and a finalist selection for the National Book Award, National Book Critics Circle Award, and England's T.S. Eliot Prize. A former chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, Jane was elected in 2019 to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Her work appears in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the New York Review of Books, Poetry Orion, Terrain.org, many eco-poetry anthologies, and 10 volumes as the best American poems, and in many of our memories where we have saved and hoarded her poems for years. Please welcome Jane Hirshfield.
Thank you so much, Alison, Derek, Drew, Simmons, all of you who are here. It's a great honor. I'm reading to you from the hem of Mount Tamalpais, a place whose elders include the Miwok people, the coastal redwoods, and the salmon. And I'm going to start, I didn't know that Derek was going to talk at such length about the H.J. Andrews, but I'm going to begin with a poem that I wrote when I was there. And you know, we've had lots of beings, and this poem is for all of the fungi of that place that I learned about. For the lobaria, usnea, witch's hair, map lichen, beard lichen, ground lichen, shield lichen. I grew up in New York City, I'll add. So back then, what did I know? The names of subway lines, buses, how long it took to walk 20 blocks, uptown and downtown, not north, not south, not you. When I saw you later, seaweed reefed in the air, you were gray-green, incomprehensible, old. What you clung to, hung from, old. Trees looking half dead, stones. Marriage of fungi and algae, chemists of air, changers of nitrogen, unusable into nitrogen usable. Like those nameless ones who kept painting, shaping, engraving, unseen, unread, unremembered, not caring if they were no good, if they were past it. Rock wools, water fans, earth scale, mouse ears, dust, ash of the woods, transformers unvalued, uncounted, cell by cell, word by word, making a world they could live in. And of course, that we could live in. And the next poem has a small mention of a wood thrush. So the great thing about going third is you get to tie into everything which has happened before you. I completely guessed these numbers when I wrote the first draft of the poem. And then I asked my local astrophysicist, because everybody has one, and astonishingly, I guessed correctly. He said, yeah, that sounds right. So first light edging cirrus. 10 to the 25th molecules are enough to call wood thrush or apple. A hummingbird, fewer, a wristwatch, 10 to the 24th. An alphabet's molecules, tasting of honey, iron, and salt, cannot be counted. As some strings, untouched, sound when a near one is speaking. So it was when love slipped inside us. It looked out face to face in every direction. Then it was inside the tree, the rock, the cloud. This next one for the gardeners amongst us or the cooks amongst us It is an anti-war poem, or a poem more of war grief, taking the shape of an artichoke. My species. Even a small purple artichoke boiled in its own bittered and darkening waters grows tender and sweet. Patience, I think, my species. Keep testing the spiny leaves, the spiny heart. You know, maybe if we just cook long enough, we will sweeten like the artichoke. So now I'm going to read some of the poems from the new book Ledger, whose birthday pretty much coincided with America's waking up to the true depth of the pandemic. I wanted to start with those earlier poems because so many of these poems are would fall into what Derek referred to as the vinegar. It is a book of grief and excoriation. This poem, I will just say, it's the opening poem of the book, and it is a poem written with the hope that by its own inclusion into the conversation, it might write itself out of the conversation. By imagining that the worst might happen, I believe this is one path towards our making a different set of decisions than we have been making. Let them not say. Let them not say we did not see it. We saw. Let them not say we did not hear it. We heard. Let them not say they did not taste it. We ate. We trembled. Let them not say it was not spoken, not written. We spoke. We witnessed with voices and hands. Let them not say they did nothing. We did not enough. Let them say, as they must say something, a kerosene beauty, it burned. Let them say we warmed ourselves by it, read by its light, praised, and it burned. So this next poem is a poem, I think it is important for the ethics of human life and the ethics of poetry to include ourselves in what we excoriate. Every time I turn on a light switch, I am part of what I am hoping someday not to be part of. This poem has, the title is the word fecit, pronounced as in church Latin. And, you know, in certain paintings, as in a painting by Dürer, it might have his initials in the lower corner, AD, fecit, and it means made it. You know, this was made by, and JH, of course, are my initials. Fecit. For a person in love, the air looks no different. For a person in grief. In this my one lifetime, while reading, arguing, cherishing, washing, watching a video, sleeping, the numbers unseeably rise. 305 parts per million, 317 parts per million, 390, 400. Shin of high granite ticks, snowless, the compound fracture. I who wrote this, like the old painters, sign this. J.H. Fecit. This next poem covers a great deal of ground. It has the International Space Station, the geomorphology of Florida, evolution and the extinction of the dinosaurs, then also terrorism, the Syrian civil war, and something which had been going on for quite a few years before I wrote the poem and is still going on today, years after I wrote the poem, the crisis of refugees in the Mediterranean. Day beginning with seeing the International Space Station and a full moon over the Gulf of Mexico and all its invisible fishes. None of this had to happen. Not Florida, not the ibis's beak, not water, not the horseshoe crab's empty body, and not the living starfish. Evolution might have turned left at the corner and gone down another street entirely. The asteroid might have missed. The seams of limestone need not have been susceptible to sand and mangroves. The radio might have found a different music. The hips of one man and the hips of another might have stood beside each other on a bus in Aleppo and recognized themselves as long-lost brothers. The key could have broken off in the lock, and the nail can refused its lid. I might have been the fish the brown pelican swallowed. You might have been the way the moon kept not setting long after we thought it would, long after the sun was catching inside the low wave curls coming in at a certain angle. The light might not have been eaten again by its moving. If the unbearable were not weightless, we might yet buckle under the grief of what hasn't changed yet. Across the world, a man pulls a woman from the water from which the leapt from overfilled boat has entirely vanished. From the water pulls one child, another. Both are living, and both will continue to live. This did not have to happen. No part of this had to happen. So I am going to read, let's see, I have a few more minutes here. I'm going to read you the darkest poem I've ever written that has in it the darkest thought I've ever written. It's a poem halfway in, and I'm going to bring you out afterwards, I promise. It's a poem written in a old Urdu Persian form, hybridized, so I will call it an American ghazal, the basic form of a ghazal, long-lined couplets with a great deal of meter and rhyme work if it were being done properly. And the rhyme is more in this poem a kind of wandering rhyme. Sounds called to sound a great deal, but it's not perfectly rhymed. And traditionally in the last couplet of a ghazal, the author names themselves, and instead I name all of us. Takes its title from the French composer Messiaen's piece you will recognize. Ghazal for the end of time. Break anything, a window, a pie crust, a glacier, it will break open. A voice cannot speak, cannot sing without lips, teeth, lamina propria coming open. Some breakage can barely be named, hardly be spoken. Rains stopped, roof said. Fires, forests, cities, cellars peeled open. Tears stopped, eyes said. An unhearable music fell instead from them, a clarinet stripped of its breathing, the cello abandoned. The violin grieving, a hand too long empty held open, the imperial piano, its 89th, 90th, 91st strings, unsummoned, unwoken. Watching, listening was like that, the low wordless humming of being unwoven. Fish vanished, bees vanished, bats whitened, Arctic ice opened. Hands wanted more time. Hands thought we had time, spending time's rivers, its meadows, its mountains, its instruments tuning their silence, its deep mantle broken. Earth stumbled within and outside us. Orca, thistle, kestrel withheld their instruction. Rock said, burning ones, pry your own blindness open. Death said, now I too am orphan. So I don't want to leave you in such darkness. The last poem in Ledger, which is not the one I'm going to read you, was written as a direct apology for having written a poem of such bleak despair. And so I ended the book with praise and apology to this world, because it is rude to see only the peril when the beauty is all around us as well. It is simply rude to the beauty not to acknowledge it. So I'll end with this earlier poem. I wrote the poem quite a while ago now, at a time when I personally needed the resilience it speaks of in my own life, but also very much with the biological environmental concept of resilience explicitly in mind. Optimism. More and more I have come to admire resilience, not the simple resistance of a pillow whose foam returns over and over to the same shape, but the sinuous tenacity of a tree. Finding the light newly blocked on one side, it turns in another. A blind intelligence, true, but out of such persistence arose turtles, rivers, mitochondria, figs. All this resinous, unretractable earth. It's been a great honor to read with Drew and Derek. Thank you so much.
What a beautiful reading. What a rich and resonant and yes, dark and light experience you've given to all of us. You three marvels. Thank you so very, very much. We do have time for questions, and I would love to invite you to pop them in the chat. I will try to monitor that and call on you if you'd like to ask your question in person. So I'll do praise is pouring in the nourishment and inspiration, as well as due to all of you for what you give us. Any questions? Okay. Easy one for Jane. What was the title of the last poem?
Optimism, and it's from the book, rather well worn here, Given Sugar, Given Salt, but it's easily found online, Optimism.
Thank you. And this one I think is probably for everybody. What can birds teach poets? Maybe Drew's the one to start us off on that.
Wow, great question. Go with the wind, right?
There you go.
I mean, yeah, go with the wind.
Well, I'll try to be as pithy as that. When morning comes, sing something.
Yeah, I want to add my 2 bits here and say that even when no one seems to be listening, keep singing. And it calls to mind Guy Clark. It's the lack of money in poetry that keeps the poet free.
Yep. I'm going to thank you. I'm going to try to invite the questioners if they'd like to pose their questions in person. Melanie Pollard has a question. Would you like to unmute yourself and pose that question?
You hear me?
Yes.
I'm asking this question from the end of the dirt road in rural Georgia. In my work with the Native Plant Society and protecting trees in our state, which was for a while and probably still is #1 in deforestation, in my learning that I have been doing for the last 5-6 years, what has really become more pronounced for me is that our soil is at the root of so much of this. The soil holds the life of our trees, of the mycelium, of all of this, and is #1 next to native plants and connecting our food web and everything else that lies us about it. So I guess my question would be, is there something that we can, a way to emotionally draw the importance of our soils to people? Because I think words and art are the way we can begin to encourage a renaissance in our environment, an awakening, especially with internet. Thank you.
Thank you. What is there a question there? What can the soil teach us, or was it a comment?
I'm sorry. My written question was, what can the soil teach plants? How can we take the word soil and make it important, make people hear it? Just like in Overstory, how that story really helps people to become interested in trees and learning about them.
Yes.
Soil.
Thank you. So Marlana, Patrice Hamer has a question for Jane and Derek. Would you like to ask them?
It's Marlena.
Sorry.
Hard name to pronounce. Okay, I don't see it exactly in the chat right now, but my question is pretty much, when you write, do you find nature coming in, even if you're like, oh, this poem is going to be about love or whatever? Sometimes you have a general topic in mind, but by nature, I think I already know the answer, but I'm asking it anyway. By nature, do you find that nature creeps in everywhere? It's kind of an unavoidable topic for, I would say, Drew, I get that, but I'm asking mainly Jane and Derek that question.
Hi, Jane. Go ahead.
Okay, so one thing which leapt into my mind was the marvelous line from the Roman poet Horace, drive nature out with a pitchfork, she will be back. Nature is so much we are nature, we are part of nature, we are inseparable. Everything we make is the same as a bowerbird's making. And so this is the fundamental shared vocabulary of existence for us and for all beings. And so, of course, it will be the vocabulary of our attempts to think about all things. But, there are urban poets. I laugh at myself because, as I mentioned in my reading, I grew up in New York City, and there's possibly 3 mentions of the city in my entire 9 books of poetry. When I was a child, the first book I bought for myself was a book of Japanese haiku, which is entirely a description of our experience of this life, this moment, this world, through images of the natural world, which even as an 8-year-old, I don't know what I was understanding from them, but I understood enough to browse it in a little store and pull out my allowance money and buy that Peter Popper Press book. But I'm going to answer one other part of your question quickly, which is to say, I almost never know what I'm going to be writing about before I start a poem. There are a very few poems where that has happened, but it's quite rare. And mostly what happens is a detail, a sound, a phrase, a sentence, an image from this world of particulars that we abide in will begin to say itself in me. And it already knows perhaps where it's going to go, but I don't yet. And in the writing of the poem, I find out what in that bole or branch or glimpsed deer rising up on its haunches to take an apple off an ancient apple tree. What in me did that summon forth?
Mhm.
And so the order of composition begins with the seen, the tasted, the smelled, the heard, and my own life then follows through that gate.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love doing things with Jane because I always learn things. And I end up, she sends me to my notebook every time, like, it is rude to see only the peril when the beauty is all around us as well.
Mm.
I remember when, Jane, you were with us for the Dear America readings, which you can see at terrain.org. And we were talking about the nature of that book and the work, the kind of work we were trying to do in the world with that, with writing. You know, that Auden, of course, was famously in doubt of. But you said you talked about there isn't anything out there that isn't also in here, and I think that's just, I've thought about that many times, about how we need to we need to nourish ourselves and work on ourselves too, and not, and not think sort of broadly, go out, we're going to change the world, but it's, we need to be what we envision, right? To paraphrase another great thinker. But Marlena, I just wanted to say that I love hearing your all's voices tonight too. And we've got some marvelous accents coming in. Oh, maybe I'm the one with the accent. I don't know. You tell me. You sound like you must know Janice Ray and Daniel Corey or something. But I was thinking, I love that point about well, to your question. It's not going to work as a poem if you have a message in mind. It's like, how do I know what I think until I read what I've written, right? Richard Hugo goes into some depth about it in The Triggering Town, and he talks about the triggering subject and the generated subject. Patty Ann Rogers has a beautiful phrase that she uses called reciprocal creation. And I have to tell you, listening to your question, it made me remember about 25 years ago, I was with Patty Ann Rogers and Bill McKibben. It was probably when Drew Lanham was in Drew Lanham was in Wild Branch with Alison. I was over here in Montana with learning from Patty Ann Rogers and Bill McKibben. And even then, Bill McKibben came out and he said, hey, whatever you do, whatever you can to use your writing to spread the word about climate change. This was in like 95, I mean, the End of Nature had come out 4 or 5 years, I think, before that. And Patty Ann Rogers, she leapt up to the podium and she said, hold on, Mr. That's not the way poetry works, and of course she's exactly right. When you don't want to write propaganda, it has to be alive. And so it's of course the whole thing is mysterious. And you start, it's like when Alison was at the H.J. Andrews and she's supposed to be writing about this decomposing tree, and suddenly her mother comes into the poem. Like, what happened here? I mean, they have to be, that's how they live, right? That's how they live. They're wild things.
Yeah.
And we have to let them be.
Yeah. Well, speaking of wild things, we have one other question that I think we'll find time for. She's been extraordinarily patient. Karen Brannon, are you there? And would you like to raise your question, please?
Yes, thank you. This is a wonderful evening, and I appreciate everything. My question is, do dreams of creatures come into your poetry, and how does that happen? How do you use dreams? And anyone can answer that.
I think Drew should start because he's answered the least.
They never left. I don't think I've ever stopped dreaming of birds. So yes. So it's just sort of they're constantly there. So now they're migrating by stars. So yeah, dreams are ever present in my writing.
And Derek or Jane, any little addition you would like to bring to that? Are we happy?
Derek, got anything?
Well, I love bringing dreams, Karen, into the conversation. And I would say, I feel that when a being from the more than human world visits me in a dream, it feels extra special. I don't, and they do. I don't often write directly from those dreams, but I do write them down, and I do believe that the act of writing them down does something for me, for the poetry. They're back there somewhere. I feel that in reading Drew's poems too, in Sparrow Envy.
And I guess I'll add that the capacity of our sleeping mind to make such glorious, strange, distilled, leaping narrative, or simply a momentary image sometimes that emerges into memory with a gold frame around it and shapes the rest of your life. That is the same set of capacities that goes into our minds being able to make poems. It is one of the vocabularies that perhaps, the linear logical poem mind is always doing a waltz with the absolutely uncontrolled mind of dream. Craft isn't imposed. The craft of writing is not imposed. It emerges from who we already are in our dream minds, how the world already is in its own narrative capacities, or lyrical, metaphorical, metonymic, synectical capacities. It all emerges from one soil, which is these experienced lives. That language has given us this marvelous capacity to put into a portable and savable form and pass from one person's pocket into another's.
Thank you. How beautiful. And what a beautiful note to end on, and for us all to think about how the world's own narrative capacities might enter us and carry us forward and help us to carry others forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you all. What a great gift you have been to us. I'm going to turn this back to Simmons here, and with my heart very full of gratitude for you this evening.
Wow, thank you all so much. You know, we're going to make this recording available, but not before I watch it maybe 5 or 6 times, just so I can live in this, because this is the dream right here, I feel like. Um, so thanks to Jane and Drew and Derek and Allison. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see everybody again. Thanks for joining us. I do want to remind folks that on May 24th, Suzanne Frischkorn will host Rena P. Espaillat, Lee Herrick, and Sean Ballard, who we announced was an award winner this evening, in a reading sponsored by the Institute for Ethnic Studies at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. So thanks everyone for joining us. Have yourself a great evening and week and beyond. Good night.